Hey there guys, so this is a new set of carvings I'd like to share with you guys. It's a little fox family, so you can see there's a small, medium, and a large, and they're made using these stencils. So there's the smallest one, there's the medium one, and the largest one. And these two are carved out of a 2-inch block piece of wood that I ripped down the middle. So it's about 4 inches tall. Just set your stencil right there and trace it out, and then take it to the bandsaw and carve it out. And this guy is carved out of a 1.5-inch block piece of wood that's also ripped down the middle. So he's a little bit thinner than these other two, so you can see that right there. You can make it as thick or as thin as you'd like, and the cool thing is that they are carved in the round, like that. So you can stand them up, and they look really nice when you put them back to back like this, and you have the baby kind of right in front. As usual, there's going to be a link in the description to these stencils. Once you go over to the Etsy store, there's many more stencils. Each of those has a video associated with it, and as far as wood goes, I just use heinekwood.com for basswood. Alright, so let's get started. Here's a piece of wood that we're going to be using. It's 2 inches by roughly 4 inches tall. And this is the large fox stencil, and what I usually do to get the height is I set my stencil on there, strike a line, get a square or something to kind of get the horizontal, and then, or in this case, because there's not much material there, you could easily just do a ruler. What you should be doing first is establishing a rough out. So you can trace everything. In fact, let's go ahead and trace everything out, and then we can take this to the bandsaw and get the actual shape cut out. So I'm just going to trace the entire perimeter first. Okay, so now we have to make a decision as to which side we want the legs on. So you can see here there's feet on this side and tail on this side. So let's do the opposite of this one. Let's do tail on this side, feet on the other side, okay? So for tail on this side, I'm gonna ignore everything below this horizontal line. So the tail wraps around, and I don't want to see any of the feet over here, just the legs that extend above that. So this part right here, and then this section right here, okay? And so you can see I'm not doing anything down here. The tail wraps around the front and it's kind of covering the legs over here. Okay, so there we have the eyes, nose, body. Okay, that's good. Now on this side, I already kind of started over here, but essentially all this material is going to get taken away on the bandsaw. So let's go ahead and draw in the feet. So on this side, I'm going to score this in a little bit deeper. Okay, do the tail. Now I'm also going to do the entirety of the feet, and then I'm going to ignore that horizontal tail. Right, so I'm not going to do this part over here. So I'm just going to go like this. See what's kind of going on over here. Oh, we didn't do the eyeball, or not the eyeball, but the eye slit. Okay, now in the back we have to wrap that tail around to about halfway. So this is roughly halfway on that material. So there's the tail, wrap it around like this, and then the legs on the back, kind of, since he's sitting down, have to come up like this. All right. So give it more of a curvature like this, and likewise for this side right here. It's a rough drawing, but once we actually start to carve it, it'll get nice and smooth. So yeah, that's the back side right there. So you can see this is the mirror of that. Okay, cool. And then obviously you'll have the ears up here that are going to get separated. Okay, so now if you have a bandsaw or a coping saw or a sawzall, whatever you want to use to get rid of this material, you could also even just use your knife and carve it out. It's really not that much material, but yeah. So get rid of that. Okay, and then this is what it should look like right here. So we have this section that's cut out, and you see I stayed away from the line a good amount, but I don't have a whole lot to take off with a knife. So there we go, that's this side. Alright, so I think we're ready to start carving. So there's really no right place to get started, but sharp knife always works. This is a roughing knife, from Flux Cut, and I use cut-resistant gloves and something grippy on my right hand. So I like to start on the swoop up here and really just get it close to the line. So it's best to not erase those lines because, well, you're not going to have them for long. And this is a good place to tell whether your knife is perfectly uniform across its edge, because when you're cutting this end grain like this, you'll start to see some streaks. So I have some streaks over here, which means that my knife is not perfect. I'm okay with that for now. So really, to get that out of there, it requires a little bit more than just stropping. You actually got to take it to a stone and re-establish that edge so it has continuous metal. But since we're not going to be cutting a whole lot of end grain, it's not that important to me. Okay, so now I'm just getting close to the line. Okay, so I'm trying to move it over here, and it's a little awkward to hold, so you got to kind of think about how it is that you're going to hold it. I recently did cut myself, so I'm kind of a little bit more cautious as to how I'm holding this guy. Let's do this guy. So I'm just trying to get rid of all those fuzzies as much as I can. Try to get a finished, clean surface with a knife. If you want to use a chisel or a gouge or something like that, be my guest. I find that the knife works perfectly fine for me. Except, of course, down here. Okay, let's work on that tail. You really got to pay attention to the grain direction, especially when doing the underside of this tail. It kind of throws me for a loop when I was doing it, so I'll show you what's going on there. So right here you're still cutting end grain, which can be a little tricky. Okay, and holding it is even more challenging. But you only need to get a little bit of that off, you don't have to take it all the way down to China. Okay, that's good right there. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. The grain direction, if you cut it out of this block, it should be up and down like this. So you can't come into it like this. You have to come into it going downhill this way. So you see how that works pretty well. Okay, and all I'm doing is getting down to that line right there. Okay, that's fairly smooth. You know, we'll work on it a little bit as we go along, but for the most part, that's pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to the V tool and get some of these lines going. So first, let's do the tail side. So the tail side, all I'm going to do is trace this line right across. There we go. Now, take this line right here. I like to do this with the V tool because the lines are much more prominent now, as opposed to just pencil. They end up kind of getting erased. So let's do this side, let's do up from here. Kind of just score every single line that you see. Okay. Don't worry, we're going to come back with the knife and really get those going. Okay, this one can be a little tricky because there's a good sharp bend, but it can be done. Okay, from there, take from the other side. There we go. Okay. Side right here. There we go. Okay, and now the back as well. So let's take that line. Let's do that. And the tail. So you notice I did not do this section right here, and that's because I'm going to come back with my knife and do this. So right here, take the knife, score it, and do that. And that's pretty much the first set of cuts that I do. Right here. Okay. So let's work on, sure, let's do the tail side. Okay, so the first thing, the knife is, I'm just gonna score all those lines. Be careful with this knife. Right towards the end here is how I cut myself. I went like this and my hand was back here. So either leave nothing behind it or watch out where you place your hands. Okay. So now, actually let's go ahead and do all of it. So right here, remember to use as much pressure on using your opposite thumb as possible if you can get to it. I have really small hands, and so it's kind of difficult sometimes for me to do that. But just be aware that if that knife slips, whatever's behind it can really get cut, even through these carving gloves. Okay. Right here. And back here. Really, it's just a series of relief cuts now. So I want the legs, this upper part of the haunch, to kind of be obscured by the tail. So I'm just going to fold it underneath the tail there. Okay. And I want this section of the body to go underneath the legs, so give it some dimension. Don't go super deep, otherwise you're just going to end up chasing it. And the same thing for this part of the leg. Okay. I would say about 1/8 of an inch is okay to tuck this behind the tail. Yep, there it is. And now we got to separate this from the other leg, so there it is. Okay, and now just kind of round it over a little bit. And be aware of the grain direction. So over here, may not seem like it, but I'm going downhill to the grain. Okay, so I might need to go a little bit deeper here. That's okay. Okay, so now I'm seeing that I need to kind of round over this edge. So let's see what's going on with the grain. So sometimes, oh, see, it wants to split on me because it goes too deep. So if I go up, it might behave a little bit better. Yep. Just goes to show that you might think you know what's going on with the grain, and then suddenly you take a knife to it and it's doing the opposite. So that's fine. Usually the rule of thumb is if it's splitting on you in one direction, just go from the opposite direction. Okay. And of course, a good sharp knife and all that helps. Okay. So let's tuck the leg underneath that tail right here a little bit more. And we also got to round over the tail. So let's start rounding over the tail on the bottom over here. And some over here. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Take that guy in. I don't really want square corners on here. And we gotta change the shape of that tail anyway, so it's not too big of a deal. Okay, and let's round this over just a little bit. Okay, so that looks okay right here. We still got to work on the tail on this side a little bit, but we're gonna do this section first. Okay, so the same thing over here. Take my knife and score as many of these lines as possible. So, like this. This front leg has to be fairly deep. So do one pass, do another pass, really cut as deep as you're comfortable cutting. Because remember, we're going to take this tail down, and if you don't cut that deep, then you're going to end up having a bunch of little knife lines on this surface of the leg, and that's kind of the telltale that it's not, it's not very appealing. So here, yeah, and of course this side is much trickier because you have to kind of get around that bend. So either a thin knife or just very aggressive cutting helps get that done. Okay, just like that. Okay, so let's work on this little triangle first. So this one right here, make sure that the corners are nice and deep, because you don't get very many chances at this one. So there's not really a good tool to get in there, and you're trying to really get that flat. But good luck. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is take my knife and do that. Like that. And I have one more to do. So there you go. That's why it's kind of important to have those corners as deep as you can. So now I have this little section right here. And that's it. I would leave it like that because it ends up being pretty tricky to get it any more than that. Oh, hello, cat. She came home with a shrew today. So just finish scoring the rest of this. Okay. And back here as well. Okay, and now it's just a series of relief cuts. Okay, now told you this tail needs to come in a fair amount, so here we go. Let's see if we did our job correctly. Okay. So this is kind of when I switch tools. I end up using a number 3 gouge, just because getting that knife around here is a little tricky sometimes. Let's see if we can do it without it. Alright, let me just show you how it's done now, how I do it. So here's my number 3 gouge. It looks like a flat chisel, but it's not. It has some sweep to it, and really allows me to kind of get in there like this. You can see how helpful that is if I have the line perfectly scored. So kind of go back and forth with the knife. I think that's pretty deep. And it's really up to you as to how deep it is that you want to go in this. Like I said, 1/4 inch is a fair amount. Okay, so now let's start to shape this tail. So you can see it's a little fat over here. We gotta take it down to that, and then we gotta taper it so it looks like a tail. And remember grain direction. I was about to get a giant blowout right here. So it may not seem like it, but this is downhill. Remember that this grain is unsupported, so if you really do start putting a lot of pressure on there, this whole tail may just completely come off, so don't go crazy here. Alright, I kind of like that shape. That looks pretty good. Alright, so now let's start to shape this leg over here a little bit. So all I really want to do is get rid of those knife and gouge marks that are down here. I need to make that leg semi-smooth. Okay, same over here. Kind of undercut the leg a little bit. Okay, a little bit in here, and do that right there. I'm just going to round this over a little bit with the knife, and round out the front of the leg a little bit as well. Okay, and yeah, so you just want to clean up that section in there. You don't want it to be a giant mess. Okay, so see if we learned our lesson. Let's take this down first. Okay. Do this section back here. Okay. Let's even that out. It's looking good. Okay. Let's work on these legs a little bit. Right here, and let's make sure that's nice and deep as well. Okay, and right here. So let's remove that section. Okay, right here. Okay. Put this guy down over here a little bit. So you can see we're just trying to separate the legs and create enough depth that it's realistic, but still kind of a caricature. Okay. I'm going to round out the back of this leg right here. Not really moving a whole lot, just enough. Round out the front of this leg as well. See what it's looking like from the front, like that. Looks okay. Maybe round out these legs over here. Alright, so this section back here, all I do is I come with my V-tool, separate the two. Right here, and separate them. And I kind of put my knife in a little bit, kind of take out this V right here. Don't go too deep. It's the morning bark about. Alright, so I could see here I didn't really get to work on these legs down here, so it's going to be a slight relief cut right over here just to get some separation between the 2 feet. Right. So that actually opens up this a little bit. Now we're able to get a little bit deeper into that corner just to make sure that there's enough separation. Okay, so there we go. That's good. And then shape this leg a little bit just to give it a little bit of an angle. Okay. And I like to remove as much of that original surface as possible. Sometimes a sanding block doesn't quite get it. So you gotta come with a knife and do that. But on a carving like this where there's a lot of flat spots, it can be a little tricky to do that because any little bit will be super noticeable, especially on the side pieces right here. So let's see if I can do that without getting too deep into the carving. There we go. That's good. Okay. Alright, so let's start to shape the face over here. So, let's see if this works. I'm going to take these lines of the eyes and kind of extend them over here. Okay, just like that, because we're going to end up erasing them. Okay, so as you can see, this snout kind of comes to a point at the front, and that's kind of what we're aiming for. So you can imagine right over here and right over here. It doesn't need to be that. You can get it to whatever shape you want, or whatever size you want. You know, you can do a big fat one like that. I think on this one it's even bigger. So it just needs to kind of give the resemblance that it's coming to a point. So to do that, just start up here. And you can see it's a big cut and then it tapers off because I want more material at the very back. And you can see why we started to draw the eyes back there, or those slits at least. Okay, let's do the other side. So it looks like a big bill right now. Okay. Making sure you guys can still see. Alright, now let's do the underside. So it looks very boxy. If you wanted to, you could do that, but I like to kind of round mount out, so I'm going to come in and remove as much of that squareness as I can. And now let's round out that nose. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So a little bit more work to do. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's do these slits for the eyes. So right here, and right here. And look at it from the front. They should. Nope, that one's kind of crooked. So gotta come down a little bit. Maybe this guy's a little bit too much. We'll make sure that they're as even as possible. And the best way to do that is look at it from the front and see how they look. So we're not going to do the entire thing, just a little bit over here. So on this angle, put my knife in, and just making that stop cut. There it is. Cool. Do this side right here, just follow that line. And come up. And if you do get them in the wrong place or at the wrong angle, don't worry about it. You can just shave it down and start again. Probably only get a couple tries to do that before you don't have enough material to shave it off with, but you'd be surprised how forgiving carving can actually be. Okay, and I'm gonna do a little bit of an angle on the top side as well. That looks pretty good. Look at that. From the front, you could see that the slits are there. And that's really all you need, because when you paint it, if you do a little bit of a brown wash, kind of lets you see that the eye slits are there. So it doesn't need to be overly pronounced, just enough to be able to tell. Okay. Cool. Alright, so like I said, I want to remove as much of those fuzzies as possible from the original surface. Over here I want to get rid of the pencil lines. Side doesn't like going that direction. Okay, do I need to, looks like I need to extend this just a little bit. Alright. Okay, so let's do two things now. One is the ears. So right here, just kind of halfway. There we go. That's good. And then right in the front, we're going to do a line right down the middle to separate the legs, and a little V for the chest. Okay. All right, for this, I just use my V tool, And separate that right there. Now I come in from the back, and just the same. I would say that's maybe 3/8, maybe even half an inch of depth. Just kind of eyeball it. Okay, now round over those ears a little bit. Okay. There we go. Now I take my number 7. This is about 3/8 of an inch. I just do little swoops right here. Remember the grain direction, you cannot come in from the top on this one. You have to come in like this. So we're going downhill. And just little indentations, just enough to kind of give it the semblance that there's an ear there. Okay. There we go. And if you go too deep, you can always kind of erase it. You can always come in with your knife and take some off. Okay, just like that. And then come back in, fix it up if you need to. Okay, so don't worry about them being a little bit misshapen. It's easy to fix with the sand block. Okay, for this I just take my V-tool, watch out because that nose is in the way, so we won't be able to get all the way in, but just enough. And then I take my knife, finish the rest of the scoring, and separate those legs. Okay, so I'm going to finish that scoring with the knife. And then I'm going to mark those V's as well. Right there. And right here. Now gouges work really well for these spaces because you can kind of get into it from here. But a knife also works. Okay, like that. And like that. Okay, and now you can kind of see the general shape of the leg and see if you actually need to change it or not. So right here, I like to give it a little bit of a V where this interface is between the body and the face, just to elongate the face a little bit. It is. A little bit more over here. There it is. See that? That gives it a little bit more depth. Maybe a little bit more on this side. Okay, excellent. Let's see if there's anything else that needs to happen. So, there we go. We're actually looking at it like this. Like that. Like that. That looks pretty good. Let's take the sanding block and kind of knock down all those rough edges as well. Alright, and to finish this guy off, I use a little sponge sander and really just kind of get rid of everything that I don't like the way it looks. So these hard, rough edges on the ears like this, there were some fuzzies there, I got rid of them. You almost kind of shape it to what you want. And then I want to knock down all the rough edges. So this carving, I almost don't want any knife marks, just because it's so long. I want it to kind of look as smooth as possible. And of course it was hand carved though. So. Okay, and then over here on the chest, I want it to also be as smooth as possible. It's a little hard to get there, but we'll get there. Okay, and then the snout the same. So you can leave yours jagged if you like. You know, just try different things. If that's the style you're going for, then, you know, that works out. But Just a little bit of sandpaper. You can see it's already kind of smooth. Especially down here, I want it to be a little bit smoother. Same for the tail. I think that looks pretty good. There you go. So there's a little fox that we added to our family. So it's growing. So there you can see you can make a ton of foxes with these little stencils. And I hope to see some of these foxes popping up everywhere. And I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for watching.